Before there was a city, before there were streets or ships or smoke, there was a river, and at a bend in that river, where the tide pulled the sand into a shallow crossing, someone decided to stop. That decision, made 5,000 years ago, would eventually produce the most famous ship ever built, the most feared shipyard in the world, and one of history's most stubborn cities, a city that has been burned, bombed, divided, and written off, a city that refused every single time to disappear. This is the full history of Belfast, and it starts not with a factory or a crane, but with the dead. Around 2700 BC, before the Great Pyramid of Giza, before Stonehenge, Neolithic farming communities raised something extraordinary on the marshy banks of a river in what is now Ireland, the Giant's Ring, a circular earthwork nearly 200 metres across, banks rising more than 3.5 metres high, and at its centre a passage tomb, a stone chamber built to hold the bones of the dead, aligned with the movements of the sun. Today it sits 6 kilometres from Belfast city centre. Most people drive past it without a second glance, but this structure is older than civilization as we understand it, and it is still standing. Whatever these people believed, about death, about the sky, about what came next, they believed it powerfully enough to move Earth by the ton with nothing but their hands. Belfast does not begin with industry, it begins with faith. Centuries later, Iron Age people climbed Cave Hill, a basalt summit nearly 370 metres above sea level on the edge of Belfast, and built a fort. From that height you could see the Lough, the Scottish coast, every vessel moving across the Irish Sea. Control the hill, and you controlled the horizon. The jagged cliff face of Cave Hill, a feature later nicknamed Napoleon's Nose, is said to have given Jonathan Swift the image of the sleeping giant in Gulliver's Travels. He saw it, he never forgot it. Around 500 AD, the land folded into an ancient Gaelic kingdom with roots stretching into western Scotland. The Romans called its people the Scotti, the name that would eventually give Scotland its identity. And in 665 AD, Irish annals record the first known historical event at this precise location, a battle, fought at the ford where the River Lagan met the River Farset, a tidal crossing where sand gathered between two currents. In Old Irish, Belfasta, the mouth of the sandbank ford, Belfast had a name before it had a town. For 5 centuries after that battle, Belfast was almost nothing. A ford, a chapel, a cluster of dwellings that nobody powerful thought worth controlling. Then, in 1177, a Norman knight named John de Courcy swept through Ulster after his victory at Downpatrick. He saw the crossing, recognised its value, and ordered a castle built to guard it, while establishing his real power base at Carrickfergus nearby. That first Belfast castle stood roughly where Castle Place and High Street intersect today. Over the next 300 years, it was attacked, burned, recaptured, and rebuilt so many times that historians lose count. In 1503, the Earl of Kildare had it torn down. It was rebuilt within decades. The town around it barely grew. By 1600, Belfast was still a footnote, overshadowed by Carrickfergus, ignored by London, unknown to the world. Everything was about to change. One man was coming. In 1605, Arthur Chichester became Lord Deputy of Ireland. King James I handed him Belfast and its surrounding lands, a reward for loyal service. Chichester looked at the boggy crossing on the Lagan and saw a city. He rebuilt the castle in stone and timber in 1611. He imported craftsmen from Britain. He constructed a quayside on the river. He lobbied London until, in 1613, Belfast received its royal charter. The Plantation of Ulster had begun. English, Scottish, and Welsh settlers arrived. The population climbed to 2,000 by 1685. Wool, hides, butter, and salted meat left the port. Wine and tobacco came back. Trade routes reached the American colonies. Belfast was no longer a ford. It was a town with ambitions. Then, in 1685, a wave of refugees arrived from France that would reshape everything. When Louis XIV revoked the protections of French Protestants in 1685, tens of thousands of Huguenots fled across Europe. Some came to Belfast. They brought with them the most advanced linen weaving techniques in the world. Within a generation, linen was everywhere, in every cottage, on every loom, flowing out of every warehouse. In 1701, less than 200,000 yards of linen were exported from Belfast port. By 1773, that figure had reached 17 million. The White Linen Hall, built in 1788 on the site where City Hall stands today, became the symbol of a city growing rich on thread. But Belfast was not just getting wealthy, it was getting ideas. Inspired by the American and French revolutions, a group of Presbyterian merchants gathered in a Belfast tavern in October 1791 and founded the Society of United Irishmen, demanding parliamentary reform and equal rights for Catholics, Protestants and dissenters alike. In 1795, their founders climbed to the summit of Cave Hill, the same hill where Iron Age people had built their fort, and swore an oath to free Ireland from British rule. The rebellion they launched in 1798 was crushed. Its leaders were executed or died in captivity. But Belfast had shown something essential about its character. It would not be silenced. After the Act of Union joined Ireland to Britain in 1800, Belfast entered the most explosive century of its existence. The linen industry, once a cottage trade done by hand, was mechanised. By 1871, 78 spinning mills employed 43,000 workers. Belfast became the largest linen producer on earth. They called it Linenopolis. The population surged from 25,000 in 1808 to nearly 400,000 by 1911. Queen Victoria visited in 1849. City status was granted in 1888. The Grand Opera House opened. Belfast had arrived. And in 1861, on a thin strip of reclaimed land called Queen's Island, two men, Edward Harland and Gustav Wolff, founded a shipyard. By 1911, Harland and Wolff was the largest shipyard in the world, employing 15,000 men. It was here, on this sliver of land beside the Lagan, that 3 Olympic-class ocean liners took shape for the White Star Line. On the 31st of May 1911, roughly 100,000 people lined the river to watch the launch of the most famous of them. Her name was RMS Titanic. Her chief designer, Thomas Andrews, had grown up in nearby Comber. He joined the maiden voyage personally to oversee every detail of his creation. When the ship struck an iceberg on the 14th of April 1912, Andrews helped passengers into lifeboats until there was no time left. He did not survive. None of the 9 Harland and Wolff men on board did. Belfast had given the world its greatest ship and paid for it. In 1921, Ireland was partitioned. 6 northern counties remained within Britain, and Belfast became the capital of Northern Ireland. A new parliament was built at Stormont on the eastern edge of the city. For 2 decades, Belfast settled into its role, an industrial capital, shipping, weaving, engineering. Then on Easter Tuesday, 1941, without warning, 200 German bombers appeared over the city. Belfast had almost no defences. London had deemed it safe enough to strip. That single night killed nearly 1,000 people. It was the worst loss of life of any night raid outside London during the entire war. Half the city's houses were damaged. Over 100,000 people were left without homes. Firefighters from neutral Ireland crossed the border to help. The country was divided. The city was burning, and they came anyway. In the late 1960s, a civil rights movement emerged in Northern Ireland demanding an end to discrimination in housing, employment, and voting. Tensions escalated rapidly. The British Army was deployed on the streets of Belfast in 1969. What followed were 3 decades of violence that claimed more than 3,500 lives across Northern Ireland. Belfast bore the deepest scars. Neighbourhoods were divided by concrete walls, the peace lines. Families were displaced. The industry that had made Belfast great began to collapse. The city that had built the world's largest ships now struggled to hold itself together. On the 10th of April, 1998, the Good Friday Agreement was signed. 71% of the population voted in favour. It was not the end of division, but it was the beginning, finally, painfully thus, of something new. In the years since the agreement, Belfast has done something rare. It has rebuilt, not by erasing its history, but by facing it. The shipyard where Titanic was born became the Titanic Quarter, home to one of the most visited museums in Europe. The old linen warehouses became restaurants and galleries. The Cathedral Quarter filled with music and people. Film crews arrived to shoot one of the most watched television series in history on the hills outside the city. Game of Thrones was filmed here. Because Belfast looks like a place where epic things happen. Because it is. From a Neolithic tomb older than the pyramids to a skyline defined by two giant cranes named Samson and Goliath, Belfast has been a ford, a village, a market town, an industrial giant, a city at war with itself, and a city learning slowly to be at peace. 5,000 years, burned down, bombed, divided, written off, every single time. Still here. That is not an accident. That is character.